Have you ever felt it happen in the middle of an ordinary day? A strange stillness, almost too deep to explain. The room looks the same. The people around you are the same. Your life, on the surface, has not changed at all. And yet something inside you no longer fits the world the way it used to. The noise feels louder. Certain conversations suddenly feel empty. Some places drain you for reasons you cannot name, and in quiet moments, it is as if a part of you is listening to something older than thought. For many people, this feeling is easy to dismiss. Stress, burnout, hormones, imagination. That is what the modern world teaches us to say. But many spiritual traditions, across cultures and centuries, have described a different possibility. They suggest that sometimes, before a person changes their life, they first begin to change their frequency. Before the outer world shifts, the inner world begins to awaken. Not dramatically, not with thunder, but with subtle signs that arrive like whispers through intuition, emotion, dreams, and silence. And that is what makes this journey so unsettling. Awakening rarely begins as clarity. It often begins as confusion, a breaking apart, a quiet sense that the person you have been can no longer contain the truth of who you are becoming. So if you have felt more sensitive, more detached from illusion, more drawn to solitude, more haunted by questions you never used to ask, this may not be the end of your peace. It may be the beginning of your power. And the deeper question is not whether something is happening to you. It is whether your soul has finally decided that you are ready to notice. There is a version of awakening that most people imagine incorrectly. They think spiritual power arrives like a gift, like a sudden light, like instant wisdom, perfect calm, and a life filled with signs that are easy to understand. But many spiritual teachers, contemplative traditions, and inner healing paths describe something far less romantic and far more real. They suggest that awakening often begins as disruption. The first sign your inner spiritual power is stirring may be that your old life starts to feel strangely foreign. You may notice that the things that once impressed you no longer hold the same weight. Approval feels thinner. Drama feels exhausting. Success, at least in the way the world defines it, begins to lose some of its spell. This does not mean you have become cold, broken, or disconnected from life. It may mean that a deeper part of you is no longer satisfied with surfaces. Many people report this as one of the earliest and most confusing signs of inner awakening. They feel grateful for what they have, yet simultaneously unable to fully return to the mindset they once lived in. At first, this can feel like loss. Friendships may start to feel misaligned. Places you used to love may suddenly leave you drained. Even the way you speak can change. You may find yourself pausing more before answering, because something inside you no longer wants to speak automatically. It wants to speak truthfully, and truthfully is slower. Truthfully is quieter. Truthfully often costs more. Some traditions describe this as the soul withdrawing energy from what is false. Not false in the sense of evil, but false in the sense of misaligned. A life built mostly on habit, fear, image, or emotional survival can function for years, sometimes decades. But once consciousness begins to deepen, the soul becomes less willing to keep feeding what no longer belongs to its path. And that is why awakening can feel uncomfortable before it feels beautiful. Your spirit may be asking you to loosen your grip on identities that once protected you, but can no longer guide you. Think of the person who spent years trying to be everything for everyone, always available, always smiling, always carrying invisible pain behind polite words. To the outside world, they seemed stable, reliable, strong. But one day, they begin to feel an almost unbearable fatigue whenever they betray themselves. Not ordinary tiredness, but soul-level exhaustion. They can no longer say yes when they mean no, without feeling it somewhere deep in their body. That change may not look dramatic from the outside, but inside, it is the beginning of power. Because spiritual power does not always look like controlling the world around you. Sometimes it looks like no longer abandoning yourself to survive inside it. Another sign begins to appear here, and it is subtle but profound. You become more sensitive to energy. Again, this does not need to be interpreted in a mystical or supernatural way to be meaningful. Some understand it spiritually, some psychologically, some as a form of heightened awareness after emotional healing begins. But however one explains it, many people experience the same pattern. You start to feel the emotional atmosphere of people and places more intensely. A crowded room can leave you exhausted. A certain conversation can make your chest tighten before a single cruel word is spoken. You begin to sense the difference between what looks good and what feels clean. This sensitivity can be frightening if you do not understand it. You may think you are becoming too fragile for the world, but many spiritual perspectives would say the opposite. You are not becoming weaker. You are becoming less numb, and numbness has often been mistaken for strength. There is a reason this first stage feels like a breaking, because it is. The old filters are cracking, the false comforts are fading, the distractions no longer work the way they used to. And without them, you are left face to face with a question most people spend their lives avoiding. What in my life is truly alive, and what has only been familiar? That question changes everything, because once you hear it clearly, it begins to echo through every relationship, every ambition, every fear, every dream. And soon, another sign begins to emerge, one even more intimate and difficult to ignore. It does not come from the outside world at all. It comes from the strange, persistent voice within you that grows louder when the rest of the world goes quiet. The second sign your inner spiritual power may be awakening is that your intuition becomes harder to silence, not louder in the dramatic sense, not a booming voice from the sky, more like an inner knowing that arrives before logic can build its argument. A quiet pull, a pause in your chest, a feeling that something is right or wrong before you can fully explain why. Modern life trains people to distrust this. We are taught to admire speed, evidence, productivity, certainty. Intuition does not always speak in those languages. It often speaks in images, sensations, repeated nudges, unusual timing, and a kind of deep inner resistance that has no immediate proof. That is why so many people ignore it for years. And yet, many traditions of spiritual practice treat intuition not as fantasy, but as a sacred form of intelligence, not perfect, not infallible, but real. A bridge between the conscious mind and deeper layers of awareness. When this intuition begins to awaken, it can feel almost inconvenient. You may start sensing the truth of situations earlier than before. You may realize someone is not being honest, even when their words sound polished. You may feel yourself pulled away from paths that once seemed practical. You may suddenly know that a chapter is ending long before the outer evidence arrives. This is not always pleasant. In fact, some of the most difficult moments in awakening happen when your inner knowing begins to conflict with your outer life. Imagine someone lying awake at night, unable to shake the feeling that the life they built is not the life their soul wants. On paper, everything makes sense. Their job is respectable. Their relationship is accepted. Their routine is stable. But each morning they wake with the same unexplainable heaviness, and each evening they feel a quiet ache they can no longer bury. That ache may be the beginning of inner truth. And truth, when first felt, often arrives as discomfort. Some people describe this phase through dreams. Dreams become vivid, symbolic, emotional, and strangely memorable. A road that disappears, a house with hidden rooms, a flood, a child, a doorway. Different traditions interpret dreams differently, and not every dream carries spiritual meaning. But many people in periods of deep transition report that their dream life becomes more intense, as if the unconscious is trying to speak in a language older than words. It is not necessary to treat every symbol as prophecy, but it may be worth noticing when your inner world becomes more active than usual. Sometimes the soul begins speaking in metaphor long before the waking mind is ready to hear it directly. Another thing begins to happen here. Synchronicity. Not every coincidence is cosmic. But many people have experienced moments so oddly timed, so emotionally precise, that they feel like reality briefly pulled back its curtain. A name you were just thinking about appears unexpectedly. A message arrives at the exact moment you were about to give up. A phrase keeps repeating through different sources until it feels impossible to ignore. Skeptics may call it pattern recognition. Believers may call it guidance. But whatever language one uses, these moments often create a pause in the soul. They make people feel seen by life itself. And that feeling matters, because awakening is not only about becoming more aware of your pain, it is also about becoming more aware of the invisible conversation between your inner life and the world around you. You begin to suspect that life is not merely happening to you, but with you. That there may be layers of meaning moving beneath what looks random on the surface. Still, intuition asks for courage, because once you begin hearing it, you are forced to decide whether to trust it, and that trust is costly. It may ask you to leave what is familiar before the future is visible. It may ask you to disappoint people who only love the version of you that remains convenient. It may ask you to sit in uncertainty without rushing to fill it with noise. This is where many people turn back, because intuition is beautiful in theory, but terrifying in practice. It does not always give full maps. Sometimes it gives only one step, one conversation, one no, one yes, one act of honesty, one moment of stillness in which you finally admit that the life you are living is not the same as the life calling you. And yet, there is power in this. Quiet power, ancient power, the power to stop betraying what your soul already knows, the power to listen beneath fear, the power to recognize that your deepest guidance may not come from the loudest voice, but from the one that stays when everything else fades. But intuition alone is not the whole awakening, because once that inner signal becomes stronger, it begins to illuminate something else many people spend years hiding from. Not your gifts, not your destiny, your wounds. And that is where the journey becomes even more sacred and far more uncomfortable than most people expect. The third sign your inner spiritual power may be awakening is that your unhealed pain begins to rise to the surface. This is the stage many people misunderstand the most. They believe awakening should feel like bliss, peace, and constant light. So when old grief returns, when buried anger resurfaces, when childhood wounds suddenly feel alive again, they assume they are failing. But many healing traditions, therapeutic paths, and spiritual teachings point toward another interpretation. Sometimes, the soul does not reveal your pain to punish you. Sometimes, it reveals it because you are finally strong enough to stop running. This stage can feel deeply disorienting. You may cry more easily. Memories you thought no longer mattered may return with surprising force. Patterns you once blamed on bad luck begin to reveal a deeper origin. Why you fear abandonment, why you overgive, why you shrink yourself in love, why you chase people who cannot stay, why silence makes you anxious, why rest makes you feel guilty. One by one, the hidden agreements you made with pain begin to step into the light. There is something almost holy about this moment, though it rarely feels holy while you are inside it. Because this is where spiritual language can become dangerous if it is used to bypass the human heart. Not every dark night is a mystical sign. Not every struggle should be romanticized. Real healing sometimes requires rest, support, reflection, therapy, community, boundaries, and time. But many people do experience a phase in which the inner life intensifies so deeply that it feels as though the soul itself is demanding honesty. Not perfection, honesty. A person may suddenly realize that what they called love was actually fear of being alone. Another may see that what they called selflessness was a survival strategy learned in childhood. Another may understand, perhaps for the first time, that their lifelong restlessness was not ambition, but disconnection from their own inner home. These realizations can be painful because they do not merely add new insight. They rearrange identity. and identity rarely transforms without grief. Some spiritual traditions call this a purification. Others describe it as shadow work, ego death, or the descent before the rise. Different systems use different words, and some use those words more carefully than others. But the underlying theme is familiar. Before new consciousness stabilizes, old falsehoods often become impossible to ignore. You do not awaken by floating above your humanity. You awaken by entering it more truthfully than ever before. There is often loneliness here too, not because you are abandoned, but because your inner world is changing faster than your outer relationships can understand. You may find it hard to explain what is happening. Friends may tell you that you are overthinking. Family may want the old version of you back. The world may reward your masks while resisting your truth. This can create a strange ache, the feeling of standing between two selves, no longer who you were, not yet fully who you are becoming. And yet, this in-between space is where many people first discover real spiritual strength. Not the strength to dominate, not the strength to appear unshaken, but the strength to remain present with yourself while old pain dissolves. To sit with grief without turning it into identity. To face your own patterns without drowning in shame. To realize that healing is not about becoming pure enough to be loved. It is about remembering that beneath the wounds, you were never unworthy to begin with. There are powerful stories in both modern healing circles and ancient contemplative traditions of people who thought they were losing themselves when in truth they were meeting themselves for the first time. A woman leaves a life built entirely around pleasing others and discovers she does not know what she wants. A man who spent decades numbing his emotions suddenly feels years of sorrow rise all at once. A person who always appeared strong finally admits they are exhausted from carrying pain they never chose. These moments do not look glamorous, but they are often the very places where the soul begins reclaiming its voice. And something extraordinary begins to happen when pain is no longer only avoided. It becomes transformed into perception. Compassion deepens. You start recognizing masks in others because you have seen your own. You become gentler, but not weaker. Softer, but clearer. Less interested in performance, more devoted to truth. In some spiritual frameworks, this is where inner power becomes more than sensitivity or intuition. It becomes presence. A steady, grounded, compassionate awareness that does not need to prove itself to be real. Still, there is one more sign, and it may be the most beautiful of all, because after sensitivity, intuition, and shadow, something else begins to emerge. Not just what you are leaving behind, but what you are being called toward. Not just healing from pain, but alignment with purpose. And when that begins, life starts to feel less like a series of accidents and more like a quiet remembering. The fourth sign your inner spiritual power may be awakening is that you begin to feel drawn toward a life that is more aligned, more meaningful, and more truthful than the one you were taught to chase. This does not always mean a dramatic career change, a sudden spiritual identity, or a complete separation from the ordinary world. In fact, many of the deepest awakenings happen within ordinary life, in the way you speak to yourself, in the choices you stop making, in the boundaries you finally honor, in the silence you begin to protect, in the strange and steady longing to live from the center of your being, rather than from the edge of everyone else's expectations. This is where awakening starts becoming less about signs and more about embodiment. You no longer want insight merely as an idea. You want congruence. You want your outer life to reflect your inner truth. And once that desire becomes real, everything changes. You may feel called to simplicity, to slow down, to spend less time consuming and more time listening. Some people feel drawn toward prayer, meditation, journaling, time in nature, sacred texts, solitude, art, breathwork, or quiet service. Others simply begin telling the truth more often. They stop laughing when something hurts. They stop staying where they are not respected. They stop calling emotional chaos passion. They stop mistaking burnout for purpose. In many traditions, this phase is not described as escape from the world, but as reunion with essence. One of the clearest signs here is that your peace becomes more valuable than your image. That shift is enormous, because so much of human suffering comes from living as if being understood by others is more important than being honest with oneself. But inner spiritual power rearranges that hierarchy. You begin to understand that peace is not passivity, it is alignment. It is the body no longer forced to carry what the soul has already rejected. It is the nervous system slowly learning that truth is safer than performance. And with that, peace comes discernment. You stop needing every door to stay open. You stop calling every opportunity a blessing. You begin noticing that not everything exciting is right for you, and not everything difficult is wrong. Some paths glitter but empty you. Others humble you but quietly restore your life. This discernment is one of the most mature expressions of awakening, because it moves beyond emotional highs. It teaches you to recognize what nourishes your soul over time. There is often a change in relationships too, not always in dramatic endings, but in emotional gravity. You begin to seek depth over attention, presence over charm, honesty over intensity. You may notice that some people feel safer now, while others feel impossible to be around, not because they changed, but because you are no longer willing to abandon your inner knowing in order to stay connected. Many people experience grief here. Awakening can show you where love is real, where love is conditional, and where you have been asking crumbs to feed a starving heart. But it also opens new forms of connection. There are moments when you meet people who seem to speak to the part of you that was always there beneath the noise. Conversations feel slower, clearer, more nourishing. You feel less compelled to perform, less afraid of silence, less desperate to be chosen. It is as if the frequency of your life begins attracting different mirrors. And then there is purpose. Not the kind sold by the world, loud and marketable and endlessly visible. A quieter purpose, a deeper one. The sense that your life may not be asking you to become more impressive, but more real. That your deepest gift may not be what gets applause, but what transmits presence, truth, tenderness, clarity, courage, or healing into the lives you touch. Some people discover this through art, some through caregiving, some through teaching, some through rebuilding their own life, so honestly that others feel less alone when they witness it. Many spiritual teachings suggest that awakening is not about becoming special. It is about becoming available to truth, available to compassion, available to a level of consciousness that can no longer live entirely inside fear. This does not make you invincible. It makes you responsible. Responsible for your energy, your choices, your boundaries, your words, your inner atmosphere. Because once you know that your presence affects the world, even quietly, you can no longer live carelessly and still call yourself asleep. And that may be the fifth sign hidden inside all the others. Your life begins to feel sacred again, not because it is perfect, not because all pain disappears, but because you start to sense that even the difficult chapters have been speaking to you, that your breakdowns carried messages, that your longing was not weakness, that your sensitivity was not a defect, that your solitude was not emptiness, that your questions were not proof of distance from the divine, but perhaps the very path by which you were being led toward a deeper relationship with yourself, with reality, and with whatever mystery breathes through all things. When that begins to happen, the world does not necessarily become easier, but it becomes more meaningful. And meaning changes how pain is carried. It changes how silence is heard. It changes how love is recognized. It changes how you walk through the ordinary days of your life. Because now, beneath the routines and responsibilities, you can feel it, a current, a presence, a remembrance that something within you has not merely survived, it has awakened. Ending. Maybe that is the real secret. Spiritual power is not always dramatic. It does not always announce itself through miracles, visions, or perfect certainty. Sometimes it arrives as a quieter revolution. The moment you stop betraying your own spirit. The moment you begin trusting the truth you feel before the world confirms it. The moment you choose peace over performance, depth over distraction, healing over repetition, presence over fear. And perhaps that is why awakening can feel both beautiful and lonely. Because when your inner life becomes more honest, the illusions around you become harder to live inside. But in that loss, something sacred is born. You begin to see that what once felt like confusion may have been initiation. What felt like endings may have been invitations. What felt like emptiness may have been space being cleared for a different kind of light. Many traditions would say that the soul does not awaken all at once. It unfolds, layer by layer, wound by wound, choice by choice. Through silence, through surrender, through listening, through courage. And if these signs are alive in you now, then maybe life is not falling apart in the way you feared. Maybe something ancient and intelligent within you is asking to be lived more fully than ever before. So be gentle with yourself in this season. You do not have to understand every sign to honor what is changing in you. You do not need to have all the answers to know that you are no longer asleep in the same way. Sometimes, the deepest transformation begins the moment you stop asking, "What is wrong with me?" and start asking, "What in me is trying to awaken?" And once that question enters your life honestly, you may never see yourself the same way again. If some part of this felt uncomfortably familiar, or strangely like a truth you have been carrying in silence, share it in the comments with just one word: awakening. And if you want to keep exploring the deeper mysteries of consciousness, healing, dreams, and the hidden life of the soul, stay with this channel. There are more doors ahead, and some of them may lead closer to who you really are.